This is me and Ali here tonight to discuss her book along with other works of art and literature, filmmakers related thematically. So, Ali, why don't you tell us a little bit about the book you wrote?
Uh, Real quick, I'll say hi to everybody in the chat who's shown up. We've got Smiling Bandito, hello, Chris Oakart, Wolverine, and Good Stuff, Comics Gator, and my dog. Okay. Uh, well, this is my book, my novella, and basically it is a Grimm's fairy tale style. I wrote it about. My dog is trying to sabotage. Stop it! Hang on.
So, I read her book and we'll be
Sorry.
discussing it tonight.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, Wolverine, hello. Yeah, anyway. So, basically, it is. I took real situations that had happened to me and people that I used to hang around with, and I translated them into a fable type story. Um, it didn't start as a book. It just started as a couple. Okay, hang on one second. I have to let him out really quick.
Okay, I'll entertain the crowd. So, the idea is we're just going to talk about Ali's book, and I was also just going to touch into other films and books and artists that I felt related thematically and also into her writing style. So we'll also talk about other things as well, and then also dovetail back into what her book and her themes and what she was doing. So that's what we'll be doing tonight. So people understand, so you're not frustrated by the course of the conversation. We will discuss her book along with other works of art and literature, and then come back around. Just thought it'd be an interesting and different type of stream to talk about things in this way, about the creative process and the things that inspired us, the traumas in life that define us, and the art that molds our minds and influences us. The writer Alan Moore said, "What makes your voice unique as an artist? What gives your unique artistic voice is your personal experiences combined with your artistic influences, and this defines your unique voice." And so I think definitely Ali's book is a great example of that because I certainly got a sense of what she likes and her aesthetic, and then I learned more that it was based on actual events. So when I read The Wild Man, I thought it was very interesting to see. This is a character. It's like a fairy tale. It's in a fantasy type setting. I started reading it. I had no idea what I was getting into. That it was going to be like that, like in a fantasy world. Honestly, so I calibrated and went into it, and it reads very much like a dream you would recall. Like it reads that way, like something things flow when it's very ethereal, and it's a character who's it's a very it's an interesting character as many things happen to him, and you see how these events can affect a person and change someone. So in the beginning of the story, this character is abused by the was the Cold Queen or Queen of Cold.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so then she sees him, and I saw it as like this character is like an innocent, very is like a seductive, innocent, young type of character who people are drawn to, and drawn to his essence, his innocence, and then people feel the need to, or this character in a way felt the need to, drawn to exploit it and even use it as a plaything, use him as a plaything, and then once done, and then as the character goes through, it seemed like someone who's abused will often draw people in who are also like natural caregivers. There are people who are very empathetic and they're drawn towards these abuse victims, and they're like magnets. These people will find each other. This is like the idea of like the law of attraction. These vibrations calibrates, and they are drawn. And even a victim and their abuser, those energies, they meet as well. If you believe things in the metaphysical, cosmic sense, like that victim found that abuser because they were vibrationally aligned to do so. So in the book, the character goes through these like he meets these fantastical characters who are all drawn to him, and I got a sense he was very much passive the entire time though. Like he just
Yeah, a lot of stuff
happening.
kind of just happens to him. That's true.
Yeah, and when I first read the book, I thought of that as a critique actually, because it seemed like he never had any drive or any action. It seemed like there was just things happening to him, and that's often a traditional story. You'd be like, well, the character has to have some kind of drive or some kind of goal they want to accomplish. And this character didn't necessarily have that. It was more just things happening, and that's why it felt like a dream. Because when you have a dream, like things just happen. If it's not a lucid dream, then you're just there, and things will happen as they will.
Yeah, it's funny that you would have that as a critique because that's the kind of person that he is in real life. The man that he's based off of. He's very much that kind of person where things just happen to him, and he kind of tries to sort of put it off as like, oh, I'm a free spirit. Most of the people in the book that are not the me character are like modern hippies. So they do like a lot of acid and a lot of shrooms and stuff, and they think that they have transcended, regular society or something. And they'll talk like this to anyone that they can. So, when I was writing it, hello, Lord Nemesis, welcome. I was gonna say earlier how I started writing it was just a little bits and pieces about the man as a person and what had just happened in his life, because I had a crush on him, basically. I think I was 22 or something, so it's been a while, but he was a couple years younger than me. And I thought that he was like the bee's knees. Because I could sit there and I was kind of under the spell where I was like, wow, he probably does know things. Like I don't know if anybody else, yes, hockey a crush. I don't know if anyone else has ever known someone like that where I feel like there's a lot of that right now, but where they kind of can rope people in with sort of a yogi type personality with a lot of language about how we are ephemeral as humans and we need to transcend to higher thought and be free, all that kind of stuff. Sorry, Mo. And that was a big part of the people that I was hanging out with. They were like that. And this guy, he does a lot of kung fu. That was like his thing. So, and he was just a very beautiful man as well. Classically beautiful. I'm not going to show any pictures, but just imagine like a Greek statue. with like 3 feet of chocolate hair, and that's what he looked like. So it was uh, very enticing, uh, especially when I was kind of naive.
The impression I got from reading the book was that he was someone who, like many people, were attracted to for different reasons.
Mhm.
And this person was just this character, the wild man, as he's written the book, didn't know what to do with himself, and so just allowed himself to be to and fro. But
Right. Well,
in the book,
when
there's a thing, the ice splinter that goes in his eye, and what was that
um
representing?
part of that was inspired by the original Snow Queen story. Not the one that Disney turned into Frozen, but the original one that has like a little boy and a little girl, and for whatever reason, an adult queen decides to kidnap the little boy, and she puts a sliver of ice into his eye and a sliver of ice into his heart. But also, um, what what I was able to tie in with that was that the woman he had been with for years, I mean, I say woman, but mentally she was like a little girl. I made her the queen. He had been working his ass off every single day for years so that he could take care of her. He worshipped the ground she walked on, and she was beautiful. It's true. But she was also a very distant person. She didn't like going outside. More and more, it just became him taking care of her all the time, and she made it impossible for him to have have any significant social life. And it all kind of came together. I'll get to the deer mo. It all kind of came together. My intense dislike for this chick.
Mm-hmm.
My dog's opening the door because she wanted to do some shrooms, and they did it as like medicinal. Everybody in Colorado's just like a really insufferable hippie who thinks that that sort of thing is gonna, you know, fly them out into the cosmos or whatever. They listen to a lot of
Mm-hmm.
Tool, they want to do DMT, like, they go to raves. It's just the kind of people, yes, Amit, this is a real story. But anyway, the mushrooms were obtained. They were supposed to have been done at their house. But because she thought I was attractive, she let all of our friends go over to her house for it. And a little bit of background is that I was usually the babysitter so that my friends didn't die. Because I didn't do any drugs because of the epilepsy. I was afraid to do it. But she didn't want me there because she considered me a threat. And I found that very insulting. So that was the first thing. And I just thought it was pathetic that he
Mm-hmm.
worshipped the ground she walked on and she used him. She didn't do anything. She didn't have a job. And then one day they went to a rave in the middle of the woods, and she met some random guy and left him for some dude in a tent. Just one night.
Now, in the book, the character
That
grows
is my dog.
bored. She grows bored with him, like, seems early on, and then he's just kind of lost after that. And as an
Yeah.
abused kind of person, then people, someone who's naturally empathetic or wants to care for someone who's hurt, then is then drawn to that. But
At the
then he doesn't.
time, yeah, at the time I thought that was the kind of person he was. Later on, I feel like that changed. Um, but yeah, the queen, and he wrote poetry. a lot of poetry, and he would self-publish these little novels with his poetry and give them out to his friends. So there's nothing like out there, to find, because it's just little things that he would order for himself. And I wrote too. So he and I would write to each other. Or maybe not to each other, but we'd give each other our things. So
And share your writing, right?
right. And that was and he was very much lost when I met him. Um whoops. And he was hurt by her. He didn't know what to do with his life because he had pretty much just planned to take care of her and work forever, just be that person who was all about her. And then she moved out like the day that she met this random dude. And obviously that would hurt any man. And it was kind of the beginning of me really thinking that, like, women today don't behave the way they should toward men. So that's a big theme in the beginning of the book for sure. And also, like, the way that I kind of write about him is a little bit worshipful, which I realize, and that's because part of the book I had started writing then, when I was just crazy about him, and I tried to spend tons of time with him. Like, I'd brush his hair, like, but that sounded weird, but we were all hippies, so it was like cuddle puddles all the time, and and constant parties. So it didn't feel weird that we all did that. And then I started writing these little snippets where I was. He knew exactly what I was writing about.
Can I talk about the writing style of the book itself, which is very poetic. It seems like an emphasis over a poetic flair, say over a solid narrative. It goes into fanciful, very loose kind of avenues. So this narrative isn't really that solid, but it's very dreamlike. There's definitely authors who've been very successful at in history. Have you ever read the work of Franz Kafka?
No.
I'd recommend him. He's a brilliant mind, brilliant writer. Dark surrealism. He wrote the story The Metamorphosis, about a man who wakes up one morning and finds that he's transformed into an insect, and then he's a burden to his family. After he was supporting his family, the only one working, and he supported all his family, then he becomes an insect, and he slowly loses all his humanity and becomes a burden to everyone around him.
Sure.
And then he wrote another book called The Trial, which is about a man accused of a crime, but he never knows what the crime he's accused of is. And it's a surreal kind of nightmare story through a bureaucracy in which he's trapped in, and he forever feels guilty. And this is kind of like a surreal kind of take on, say, like 1984 Brave New World, but like this book came out before those did. And if you could imagine that kind of political kind of story, but through a nightmarish, surreal tone. And when you read that book, it feels like a potent sense of like paranoia. Like when you read that book, you feel as if you're in this bizarre dream, and it really has a powerful effect on you. But I think that character, his name was Joseph K. in that book, he's still looking for answers, and like he's active, that's what they say, like a protagonist in a book. But as you described, it makes sense that this person you knew was passive, throughout most of their experiences, so that's why you wrote it that way. But you can do the kind of loose narrative, kind of dreamlike thing where things just surreal, kind of take as things flow, but still have an active character looking to change something or achieve something. I definitely recommend checking out his work.
Okay.
How about the characters he meets after he gets away from the queen?
So It's been a while since So I really only had the beginning part written. Well, I had some. Let me start over. So what I wrote first was about the Autumn Woman character. That was supposed to be me. I didn't really have any plan for the rest of a book at all. I just put Autumn Woman and Wild Man together because I was trying to show him, like, hey, I want to be with you and I can take care of you instead of you having, to babysit this chick who doesn't appreciate you and wasting all your, all your talent and all your energy and all your passion on this chick. And yeah, it is a little bit of a self-insert, but I think I did a better job than like Twilight or 50 Shades of Grey. I made it, I tried to make it beautiful and make the language flow and use a lot of natural imagery, which is why there are chapters where there's not even any people. There's just a description of the land that they're in.
Yeah, it's a very poetic flair, and it does work. I mean, I didn't necessarily think that, like, oh, this was you. It felt like just these forces of nature. And that's actually another subject to the book, the flow of seasons. And again, that's just like things happening that beyond your control. It's almost like the character, everything is beyond his control, or he's willing to let things be beyond his control, and just the seasons of the earth that also just happen with or without us.
Yep, and that was another thing that they were all into. They considered being passive in life as being, what's the word? Enlightened. That was a word they used a lot. They considered being passive in everything that they did, being enlightened, being part of nature. I don't know if you've ever seen The Fountain. It came out a while ago, but yeah, but they were really big into that. And they considered just sort of going with the flow as them being better than everyone else, really, because that's how they acted. Honestly, they're more enlightened.
The passivity that was also could lead to like no boundaries, and perhaps invites abuse or exploitation, or can potentially anyway.
Exactly. And I was in sort of a vulnerable headspace when I met all of them. And I kind of fell for it. After like a lifetime of having no friends, pretty much, it was just really cool to like meet people who are like, oh, you're so beautiful. Oh, we appreciate you. Oh, you're a wonderful soul. I know what it sounds like now, but it's very enticing when you meet people who are basically hippies. And the other characters, like I said, I had only written Autumn Woman, and I only had, I don't know, I want to say I had 2-ish chapters, but they weren't even really chapters. I had just scribbled down some scenes that I wanted him to read to sort of communicate to him in a language I thought he'd understand. And he did understand, but he almost didn't care. It was kind of like it just fed into his narcissism, because they're all very narcissistic people.
Mm-hmm.
And it at the time I kind of left them and didn't finish it, but he was so into what I had written because of the narcissism. You know how I said that he would take like his poetry and then self-publish little books and give them out to his friends.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I got pregnant, and I went to them, this little group of friends that I had, my hippie friends, and I said, hey, I'm gonna go, and I'm probably not gonna see you guys again for at least a year, because I'm gonna go do this, because this is important, and I don't want to hang out, in this setting anymore when I want to do this. But could you guys take an hour? Because I had an hour before my ride was going to pick me up and I was going to leave the city. Just move away. I said, can you just hang out with me for an hour outside their house? And these people that I'd had very, close experiences with, we'd done a lot together. I felt, I guess, that we were closer than they thought, because they said, no, we'd rather go smoke pot on the other porch. And it was, at the time, pretty hurtful, pretty frustrating. I was not happy. I didn't talk to them for a long time because it was a huge betrayal. I mean, I don't need to get into specifics, but there were just a lot of things that we had shared over the years that I interpreted differently, I guess, than they did in the end. In the end, weed was more important for them. So I kind of put any Wildman stuff on the back burner and just did my thing. Didn't go up there as far as I considered it was over. So I almost didn't even write it. But I got in the mail a little book. And I have it over there, but I'm not going to show it because it has his name on it. And it was flower language, of course, very... I was pretty disillusioned from it all by then, but the gist of it was, this book is has writings that my friends have done, and I compiled it for them to show how much I care about them. And I was like, I wonder what he shared of mine, because as far as I knew, I hadn't left my journal. I have my journal that I originally wrote, right, Wild Man In is right over there. I hand wrote it. I had only let him borrow it to read those pieces. Well, it turned out that while he'd borrowed it, he'd actually copied it onto... No, this isn't about Egg Beater Bandito. He'd copied it onto his computer in 2 huge just chunks, unedited, no, like, not even a tab, and he put my name on it, and it was god awful, because it's not even like it was a first draft, and it was supposed to be private. It was supposed to be something that I wrote just for him, and basically he was publishing my words without my permission. So I wrote probably the meanest letter that I've ever written anyone, and I sent it to him. I'm pretty proud of it. I wish I'd kept a copy, but doxed. And I decided, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to finish this, and I'm going to put everything in there so that a stranger could not figure it out. But if he reads it, if any of my friends my weird hippie friends, read it, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And at this, revenge publishing, exactly. And I was going to show him, like, this is why I didn't want... This is why I was so mad. Because what you put out in the world without my permission wasn't complete. It isn't beautiful. It was imperfect. So I decided to put it together and show him that. So actually, the one that I sent to him and I signed, I wrote in, "This is why I didn't want you to publish this," and I signed it. Misery in reverse. But there's the whole other half of the story before I left them was that there was another girl. I mean, isn't there always? But this other girl was a lot like the girl who had just left him. And the reason that I call her a deer in the story is because she's kind of doe-eyed. She was much younger. She was very, very thin and like lanky.
She seemed elusive too, huh?
Yeah, and she did that on purpose because she knew what would drive him crazy. And I didn't. So
Well,
so
you have the quality that wants to take care of that, but that's not what he's looking for, right?
right.
He just enjoys it while it is, but he has his eyes set on something else.
Yeah, and she would do this thing where she was like, "Oh, I don't care. I'm giving up on him." And and she and I would hang out and like pick up trash in the river and stuff because that's just what we did with our free time. And eventually, though, he did start dating her, which is fine. I don't care. And they're still together as far as I know, and they're married and they have a kid, which is all fine. It all happened after the book, like the kid and all that stuff. That all happened after the book was already published, and I had sent it to him. But I put in the other characters' spring. Oh no, narrator she cared. Spring Child, Summer Girl, Autumn Woman, and Winter Lady, because they're all me. In the beginning, it was just Autumn Woman, but it needed to have more of a coherent narrative.
That was the writer you building up the narrative.
Right.
It's a cohesive story, yeah.
It was a way for me to translate, like, well, I was there for you afterward. You took what you needed. We sort of grew a little bit together, and then you just kind of, like, ran off after this girl who was just a mindless animal as far as I was concerned. Maybe they're different now. I doubt it.
Can I talk to you about throughout the course of the book, though, the character
Sure.
takes from going from being passive, though, and he takes being abused, but then the character himself, Wildman, takes a dark turn and does the abusing. And there's a certain allusion to, say, him violating someone, or this in the book, like a character. It seems like.
He didn't do anything like untoward in real life. I just wanted to show a darkness, I guess.
From being manipulated, then the desire to want to control, he sees the opportunity to do so.
Yeah.
We can talk about it in terms of the book, so you don't have to go too deep into the real people.
Well, I mean, it's not really that like long of a portion because he just kind of lays down with the little girl. I don't really go into details, but I wanted to show the darkness because I think that the mindset of this whole group of people is very destructive, and they use people, and they did really horrible things to people they wanted to use, manipulating people who they could tell were maybe not mentally prepared to deal or to resist manipulation. And a lot of that went into the last half of the book, where it gets very dark. He gets obsessive and goes pretty much crazy. I get the comment a lot now that, like, auto-cannibalism is a theme in a lot of my books, but it's really only in 2 of them. I don't think that's fair. But including in this one, and it's because I wanted to show, like, oh, he's a narcissist. You know, so he doesn't want to lose any pieces of himself because he just built himself back up, or he thinks he built himself back up because I write him as, like, someone whose memory easily forgets people. And but he wants to remain himself, and that's why, like, he's running through and he'll eat, like, everything that comes out. And also it was like, I hate this person a lot now because of how he acted toward me and others. So he can fuck off and eat his own shit.
Which
basically
the character literally does in the book, right?
Yeah.
Dying feces. Can I ask
Absolutely.
where this idea or the influence of, say, doing this as a fairy tale, like, what stories did you like growing up that would influence this decision or to take it in this direction?
There's not really anything deep into that. While I did, like, read Aesop's fables and stuff a lot as a kid and enjoy them quite a lot, and Grimm's fairy tales, honestly, how it all started was that one of the best ways for me to practice writing, because I do practice, you know, I do work on technique and stuff. One of the best ways that I do that is I start a story with once upon a time, and I try to make a coherent and cohesive story that fits on one page. It's called flash fiction, but I didn't know that when I used to do it. And the only reason that I chose Once Upon a Time was because of this is honestly a little embarrassing, but I'm not sure why. You know, in The Sixth Sense, when the little boy is talking to Bruce Willis, I think in the hospital, and he's like, tell me a story or something. And Bruce Willis starts it out as like, well, once upon a time, there was a prince, you know, and then it goes on, and I was like, oh, that's a really good idea to just sort of go into it. So now that's pretty much whatever I do, and that's how I started it.
That was also used in Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah, it was. Not quite as obviously, not quite as on the nose, but Pan's Labyrinth didn't come out until I was like 18 or 19, though.
Sure. Well, I mean, these things are archetypal. These are fairy tales that exist deep in the cultural psyche, you know, rooted in our ancestors. I was a big fan of Aesop's fables as well. These are great, powerful parables all in one page. They can say a lot in one paragraph. So,
well, and I added the songs because, you know, there are little portions where it's like the Wild Man's Song and Autumn Woman's Song. I added those because since they're hippies, they'd sit around and get out their bongo drums and, you know, bang away on an out-of-tune guitar and stuff. And I would take like recordings of them doing it and stuff, and so I would sit and kind of like make the song, and they're really short. They're not really songs as much as they are short poems. But I would sit and I would listen to those old recordings, and I'd sort of hum and make the song about each character come out. So, yeah.
When you said that you loved The Labyrinth when you growing up, that was one of your favorite films. Me too. I saw this film many times. As I got older, though, I feel like I loved The Dark Crystal more. I grew to appreciate Dark Crystal much more. I still love Labyrinth, but I can still watch The Dark Crystal today and get a lot out of it. And people have actually analyzed that film as well and said that there's definitely metaphors going on for, say, sinister forces in our world, like the Skeksis who rob the kind of like souls and just consciousness of those, I forget the names of those little creatures, but the ones where they flash the lights on them and then kind of just like rob them of their essences. Remember?
Oh, oh no. Now that you said you can't remember, I can't remember either. It starts with a G. Gelflings.
Well, those were the main characters, but there was also like the smaller little creatures that were even more like vulnerable. Remember? And they would flash the light on them, and
Oh
they would
yeah, but
go
it didn't.
comatose.
Yeah, but it didn't work as well as Gelfling souls or essence.
Yeah, those
It
are
would
the
just made
desired
them like,
ones.
yeah. No, I like the Dark Crystal a lot, but I guess I just like Labyrinth more because I can watch it over and over again at pretty much any time. And it has life lessons in it that I think are applicable just constantly. Uh, Dark Crystal in itself is kind of like a modern, Renaissance painting. Everything about it. I made a I made a an IMDb list that was a list of perfect movies that are no more and no less than what they need to be, and they're beautiful. Um, in creation, in execution, writing, music, everything. And that is definitely one of them, which is why I couldn't watch the new one honestly, because I was like, it's just gonna break me. It'll
I still haven't
probably
watched the
break
new one
me.
either. I might watch it someday, but yeah, I haven't watched it yet. I heard the Dark Crystal, they started shooting that like without even like a full script. They just like pulled their artistic resources together and all their talent and just started going, with making up this world, and then they kind of crafted the story as they went along, which that was very
Right.
interesting approach to making a film, but it worked, right?
Well, and from the Dark Crystal came Labyrinth, so it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like its parent in a way because they went to David Bowie and they showed him like, hey, would you want to do a movie like this but with songs? And he was like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
why not? I'm David Bowie.
I read Jim Henson's biography, and he's a fascinating man, and he became very influential and very powerful. Just he was a unique mind. His innovations in puppetry and his experimental films he did, and just the talent that he would draw. And if you look at the scene in Labyrinth with the masquerade ball, David Bowie and Jennifer Connelly, you notice that masquerade ball scene has some similarities to the masquerade ball scene in Eyes Wide Shut. And it's this bizarre dreamlike sequence, a little nightmarish with these people wearing masks, and in this little kind of nightmarish dance scene. And in Eyes Wide Shut, people have said that that's like a reference to like actual secret societies and like sort of Illuminati kind of gatherings of elites who engage in that kind of behavior and the things that they do there. And it's my belief that Jim Henson was definitely courted by those kinds of people in his life because he was an influential person who influenced children because of what he was doing. So they would want someone like Jim Henson on their side. So I think he was probably invited to those kinds of things. And this is speculation, but I believe he sold off the Muppets because he didn't want his children targeted. I think he sold it off to Disney so that they wouldn't go after his children to try and break them apart or try to take the Muppets from them and all that. And Jim Henson died in a kind of young and mysterious way, but that's a
I
tangent
I
there.
don't I don't know anything really about how he died or anything.
It was an
I've kind of
unusual.
tended to avoid it.
Yeah, it wasn't. He had like a weird infection. It was a little unusual, but he took care of those things before he died, though, as if on some level he was aware of things happening, So, but when you look at the similarities between that
Warpath
labyrinth masquerade ball, eyes wide shut, it is interesting.
Warpath has it right. They were called podlings. The little things from the
Oh,
Dark
the Dark
Crystal.
Crystal, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see Eyes Wide Shut until just a couple of years ago, and I thought that movie sucked. So,
Well, he died. Stanley Kubrick died before. Well, the story is fascinating. It was in post production. He had a cut, and he showed it to the executives, and they like flipped out. Stanley Kubrick has final cut in his contracts, and like it was when they were yelling, they were flipping out about this movie. And then Stanley Kubrick died very mysteriously, and the film was re-edited. It had like 20 minutes chopped out of it, and then was released in the cinemas. And you can see the allusions or references to these kinds of elites, kind of weirdo parties, and the kind of strange things they do there. And many people speculate what Stanley Kubrick was talking about in that film. But getting back to your book, though, and when I read it too, the writing style also reminded me of like Neil Gaiman, of like kind of like his prose short stories that he writes. And I love Neil Gaiman's work. I'm a big fan of his. And so definitely that he's someone who writes a dark kind of fantasy or writes in this dream-like way. Of course, The Sandman is all about dreams, but even just his writing style is very like a dream. So,
yeah, it
had you
can
read a
be.
lot of Neil Gaiman when you at the time, or did you discover him later in life? Or
No, I definitely read a lot of Neil Gaiman. Incidentally, the other group of friends I had were really into Sandman. Um, and they introduced me to him. So, yeah, yeah. And I have a bunch of his books. I have his signature tattooed on my arm.
where'd you get that signature?
What do
What
you
city
mean?
was that in? Like, did you meet him somewhere, or
Oh, Denver.
was it a book
It was
signing or
in,
something? Or
yeah. And actually, I brought my big, like, death omnibus for him to sign, and it wasn't even like a Sandman. Whoops. It wasn't even like a Sandman signing. It was for some other book. But I was like, I don't really care about the other book because I just
he's
got
prolific.
this. Yeah, he was very classy about the whole thing where I was just like, "Hello, can I have this? I don't really care about your other book." I mean, I didn't say that, but I'm sure
Yeah, I'm sure you're
I
more
didn't even
diplomatic.
yeah, I didn't even buy the book that was there. I was just like, "I already have the one I want you to sign." So here you go, and also could you sign my arm? And then I went like I'm holding my arm out, while I'm taking the bus directly to the to my tattoo artist, and I was like, "Do it now! I
You went
don't want it to
directly.
get ruined." Yeah.
I used to go
Uh,
to Comic-Con years ago. I used to, like way back, and I've gone in a while. But I would see being out like at 2 a.m. with friends. Just walking around the hotels and just getting drunk, and the whole city gets taken over. And we're seeing Neil Gaiman out at like 2 in the morning with some beautiful like goth woman around his arm. It's a fun times.
that's his MO, or at least it used to be.
He has a type, right?
Yeah. Now he's married to that crazy chick from that band Dresden Dolls, and they have like
Amanda
kids
Palmer.
and stuff. Yeah.
I think they split up already. Actually, I think they just did a few months
Oh,
ago. That just happened,
yeah.
I think.
I stopped. I stopped paying attention to any of that. What's my favorite gaming book? I don't know. Um, actually, you know what I do know? It's just a kid's book though. It's called Blueberry Girl.
Mm-hmm.
And the
I've read
reason
that one.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
um, the reason I like it is just 'cause it's kind of a lot like Wildman actually, in that, it's kind of lilting sort of fun, beautiful language that I mean, it's not a book. It's just a kid's book.
It's
But
a picture book, yeah.
yeah, he didn't draw it or anything. But that one's probably my favorite. I've read a good amount. I don't think I've read all of them.
The Graveyard Book is really good. That's a children's
Oh
book.
yeah, the
It's like
Graveyard
the
Book
Jungle Book.
is really good.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just read that I think 2 years ago. My
I
kid
found interesting.
wasn't into it though.
I know. So interesting. Comic-Con story, real quick. Karen Berger was the editor-in-chief of Vertigo Comics, and she recruited a lot of that British talent. And she
Mm.
discovered Neil Gaiman along with like Grant Morrison, who's another amazing writer who I love, and she also brought Alan Moore to America. She's an amazing woman because she was the editor who found Vertigo and all this stuff and kind of shepherded all this talent. So one night out at one of the hotel, in the lobby where everyone would go hang out at Comic-Con after night, and I look over and actually see Karen Berger like sitting over there in a chair. She was by herself. As someone she was talking to, they went away for a minute, I think, to do something. So she was by herself. So I had a little bit to drink. So I went up to her and just told her, like, "Hey, you're Karen Berger, aren't you?" Like, so I just want to tell you I have such great respect and appreciation for all that you do. I told her, Neil Gaiman and Grant Morrison are two of my favorite writers of all time, and I know that I wouldn't be aware of those individuals if not for you. So just, thank you for all that you've done. Her friend came back and she said, "Oh, that's really nice of you to say. A lot of times people don't really appreciate what editors do." It's like, "Oh, that's nice of you to say that." It's like, "Oh, thanks." I said, "What's your name?" It's like, "I'm Dave Gibbons." I'm like, "Oh, Dave Gibbons is the artist of Watchmen. It's pretty iconic." So then like, "Oh, Dave Gibbons, okay." But then I didn't want to be like, "Oh, well, like I just praised Karen Berger, so I didn't want to be like now on this guy's like, that's it." So I kind of, okay,
Just
well, Dave, well,
fanboy all over
yeah.
them.
Well, I didn't want to do that though because it would take away from Karen. So I said, "Okay, Dave. Well,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna praise you. I feel like you've been praised enough. If anything, you could be brought down a peg." And she's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Yeah, you're probably right." I was like, "All right, thanks. I was giving you all." Then I just went about my way.
Based artist.
Do you know Grant Morrison's work at all?
No, I don't.
He's wrote a ton of comics, and he's friends with Neil Gaiman. He's part of that Vertigo scene.
Mm.
I think you'd like his stuff a lot too. Actually, he's very colorful, wild science fiction. Great graphic novel he wrote called We Three. It's about a dog and a cat and a rabbit that are turned into these cyborg military weapons until the government decides to terminate the program. Then they're on the run. And it's from their perspective. It's a really beautiful, poignant story. I think you'd really like it.
That's really funny because I have this book of like short stories by Dean Koontz. He's not known for his short stories, but they're actually pretty okay for like light reading. He can spin a good yarn, but when you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, because in one of those he has a short story that's called We Three.
Oh yeah.
But it's not about that at all. So I was like, oh, yeah, it's
story,
just it's just about three like basically sort of X-Men kids who are like really smart and have powers, and they like just murder everyone in the world. So it's just them and their siblings. So they're like 10. They're like, oh, we're gonna repopulate the world, and it's very strange. That's what I thought you were gonna talk about, but I'm glad it wasn't that, because it is a weird, like Stephen King sort of esque thing.
Yeah, Grant Morrison's an amazing writer. He wrote a series called The Invisibles, which is like this cosmic, like kind of weird, like spy science fiction thing. It's very psychedelic, and it's very cool. And there's like they go on these weird, like drug kind of time travel trips and all that. So it's a very interesting writer, fascinating guy too. There's also the writer Alan Moore, though. He was Neil Gaiman's mentor.
Sure.
And he also writes very, poetically and just beautiful prose and also very dark. Goes into some very macabre themes. He's famous for his run of Swamp Thing. I mean, that's what kind of made him famous, his breakout thing in America. But if you ever get a chance to look at that stuff, that Swamp Thing run, again, I think it's very beautifully written horror. It's you know that character? Are you familiar with him? Swamp Thing.
Swamp Thing? No, I'm not. I do appreciate beautifully written horror, though. It doesn't happen very often. Kind of like a beautiful horror movie doesn't happen very often anymore, unless you're like watching a Korean one or a Japanese one. Um,
Yeah, that Swamp Thing run is excellent, and it is. Alan Moore writes beautifully, and it's horror, but then it's a love story too. He's this Swamp Thing is this like monster who was born from the swamps when the scientist is killed, and his body is goes off in the swamp, and it's like deteriorates and morphs with the swamp, or at least the origin kind of changes. But then the love of his life when he was a human, like he meets her, but now he's this green monster. So it's this love story element as well. There's a beautiful horror film though. It's called May, May, that came out I want to say about like maybe 15 years ago.
I love that movie.
Yeah,
My
that's a great
my
film.
friends used to make fun of me and call me May because I've been known to like tell people I like their body parts. I'll be like, "Oh, you have beautiful hands," and they'll be like, "That's weird," and I'll be like, "I love your jawline." I'll be like, "That's weird,"
You
and I'll be
gotta
like, "I'm sorry, I just am,"
just
and
take
they
that one
showed
part and
me.
then put them
Yeah,
all
they
together.
showed me that movie, and I was like, "Yeah, I get it." I totally empathize with this character. They're like, "That's
Yeah,
weird."
and that's a beautifully crafted film. Yeah, I love that film. It's very influenced by Taxi Driver. I don't know if you've ever seen that with Robert De Niro, that classic movie where he's like does the "You Talking to Me," but a character's loneliness and then how it drives them towards you know eventual violence.
I
And
haven't seen
again,
that, but I did see Joker. Does that count?
the Joker was heavily influenced by Taxi Driver as well. So yes, so both Joker and May were. You probably saw some similarities in themes actually. Yeah, if you saw May first, you would have noticed those recurring patterns.
um,
And just as your
maybe not so
story, the
much with
character.
May, but now that you mention it, yeah.
So your character and your protagonist, though, eventually becomes goes from just being kind of passive and things happening to them and really not taking action, just subject to whatever forces there are, and then eventually takes on dark turn and abusive, and then just indulges in self-inflicted harm with eating fecal matter and just completely debasing of self. I wonder if that was like how conscious were you of say of that trajectory for the character when you started writing that book? If you have any ideas, if you were thought of that at the beginning, or that would be the course he would take in your fiction anyway.
Um, to to write a character like that?
Well, for the character just being like passive and seemingly innocent, but then going towards a dark, violent, self-destructive path.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, you could say I wrote Wild Man as innocent, and maybe I did in the beginning, but I would think that honestly, with the amount of animosity that I wrote the rest of the book uh, with, in, whatever, it was mostly just me calling him stupid. Quite honestly.
Well, for me, when I read it, since it was a fairy tale, like I didn't take it that way. I just take it as like
Sure.
he's like a young sprite kind of character. So
Right, no, which is why I was was good with it, because I was like, anybody who doesn't know is just gonna read this like weird lilting fairy tale and then maybe be freaked out, and then if they like it they like it. But um Mo is talking about how I'm gonna make an effervescent elk and stuff.
there's also a filmmaker who delves into like dreams and surrealism, but in a much more like in a violent, dark way. Filmmaker named Alejandro Jodorowsky. He also writes comics too, but he made these famous films, El Topo, Holy Mountain, and Santa Sangre. Those are probably the three most famous ones he's made. He's made a few others, but those he's a very unique and bold visionary artist. He's a hardcore surrealist, and he knew like Salvador Dali and everything, and he was way back then. But his films have this like bizarre dream-like language. They just happen in the film, and you just accept it, like these strange scenes. And he
Is it
goes
kind of like
deep into the violence.
Mirror Mask?
Yeah, like Mirror Mask, way more darker and way more violent.
Well, Mirror Mask is like a kids movie, so
Yeah.
I recently
But the
found.
circus aspect, yes, yeah, like that. It's not the song; it is about a circus, actually. The
Okay,
first part of the
I
movie.
at the dollar store I just found a book or a movie that said it was written by a comic artist, but I never heard of him, and I don't have the friggin' movie in here. And I don't remember what it was called. I hadn't watched it yet. So why bring it up? I don't know. Maybe I'll post it on Twitter and see if that's what you're talking about. It was totally weird though that I found it. The cover looked a lot like Pan's Labyrinth, but like blue.
That's interesting. There's the on this filmmaker Alejandro Jodorowsky. The first film he ever made. So he's like in Mexico in the '60s. He was doing like experimental, like underground theater, wild stuff. Where there are people getting naked and smearing themselves with all sorts of things. And he liked surrounding himself with like bizarre characters. And he had this young kid who was like physically and mentally challenged, and he had this deformities. But his father was this very wealthy man, and he was just born that way. But Jodorowsky liked having him around because he just liked surrounding himself with that kind of thing. So, but the father was thankful to him that he gave his son like this purpose. And like so he told Jodorowsky, if you ever need like money to finance a play or anything, let me know. I'll do it. It's like, well, I don't really need that, but maybe in the future if I want to do something else. So later in life, I want to do a film now. So he made his first independent film. He got the funding from this rich man who knew, and it was an independent underground film, like guerrilla filmmaking. He shot it like on the weekends over the course of a year. The movie's called Fondo y Lis. So he was just doing underground experimental theater. So like only people who were into that weird stuff would even know who this guy is. He made this first film, and it had its world premiere at the Acapulco Film Festival. So nobody knows who this guy is, this filmmaker Jodorowsky. So the film starts playing, and it's a very bizarre film, and the film like makes people so unsettled, and like eventually the film actually incites a riot. And literally police had to whisk this director Jodorowsky out of there because an angry mob literally wanted to kill him. Like they had to chasing him down, they were going to kill him for real, and the police had to whisk him out of there to get him away.
That's
and
crazy.
uh, and when you watch the film today, this film's from like the mid '60s, and when you watch it today, it is unsettling. It's an unsettling film, and it arouses all sorts of bizarre feelings. And it's not a horror film; it's a love story.
I mean, you
So
could call a love story a horror story depending on your mindset, really.
yeah, it's
I kind of
well,
look
it's like
back on
dark
on
passage.
hanging out. Sorry.
No, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Oh, I kind of look back on hanging out with all those people as kind of a horror experience. Because I shouldn't have done that, and the things that they did and the things that they said were all kind of evil, honestly.
But on the surface, it seemed like they were onto something.
Oh yeah, on the surface it's like, oh wow, you guys are so beautiful and enlightened, and it was funny because I sent it to him and he wrote back that it was remarkably well written with a frowny face. And his freaking business card, which I thought was ridiculous. I was like, oh, thanks for your business card. You're in Colorado and I'm in Florida, and I just wrote this book about how much of a shit you are. And you expect me to like want to go, I don't know, get kung fu lessons from you. Or no, he was starting to do what's it called? Like counseling. That's what it was. So he's like, here's my counselor's card, so you could come to get counseling. And I was like, this guy's not even freaking been in medical school. He's probably just like, hey, you should microdose. Like, ugh. And here I
Scary.
am writing about how, like, he needs to just eat shit and die in a very poetic way. And he's just like, you need help. I will help you. I was
Was
like,
that like you, because you thought he was full of shit? Like, or you came to realize that, so he's just eating shit and
yeah,
regurgitating?
yeah, kind of. I mean, but also just like it's gross. You know, like, go be gross. Do whatever. I don't. Ridiculous stuff. So,
So
I
one of the
pulled
other
up.
films. Oh, what's that?
Oh, I pulled out the journal that I wrote it in, and I was gonna show like some of it, some of the original stuff. But you can talk while I look for it.
So I was gonna say one of the other films that I was reminded of when reading your book was the film called Mulholland Drive by David Lynch. Have you ever
Okay.
seen that or know it?
I have not
Came out
seen a
around.
single David Lynch movie.
I'd say Mulholland Drive is my favorite David Lynch film. Came out around like 2001, something like that. And it's kind of like his version of like Sunset Boulevard, like a Hollywood fable. And like say like the first 3 quarters of the film is actually a dream, but you don't know that when you start watching the movie. And this it kind of shifts all of a sudden. But there's a lot of strange things that happen, or it's like certain things seem over the top, and then there's a certain sense of foreboding and dread, but you don't really know why. And then all of a sudden you realize it's someone who's like viewing themselves maybe through an idealized lens or demonizing someone else, and these certain events that they transmutated from the real life were interpreted in a certain way in the dream part. So it's a very interesting film. It's a very powerful film too.
All right. I thought David Lynch was like some kind of weirdo.
Well, he is. It's a surreal film. It's he makes surreal films. Yeah, they're good films. They're well, I guess not everyone's cup of tea, but they're yeah. It's if you've seen like the film Sunset Boulevard, you know, like classic movie with the Hollywood actress, where she says, you know, I'm ready for my close up now, Mr. DeMille. It's like his kind of take on that kind of story of a Hollywood fable.
Okay.
There's also another film from the 70s, which I don't know if a lot of people have seen, but it's called The Day of the Locusts. That is, I don't know if anyone in the chat has seen that. Just speak up, because it's an interesting film. That is like the angriest film ever made about Hollywood. You, you'll never
I
see
like
anything more scathing.
angry revenge films.
Well, it's based on a book written in the 30s, and it's about a young like art director who moves out to try to make it in Hollywood, and it just goes into the abyss of just madness and darkness, and you just see the seedy underbelly of Hollywood, and you see a lot of interesting characters. One of them is Burgess Meredith, the actor like from Rocky and played the Penguin. He's in it as
Okay.
an like aging vaudevillian actor who's still doing comic things, but now he's just kind of like a door-to-door salesman, but he still was kind of tapped into show business from his youth. And then Karen Black, you know, she does a bunch of horror movies. She's in it as like an aspiring starlet. And Jackie Earl Haley, the actor who played Rorschach in the Watchmen movie, he's in it as a kid, and he plays like a really obnoxious, bratty child actor. And he's just really like he's wearing this like those ridiculous outfits that kids wore like in the 30s, you know, that look kind of really feminine and girly. And he's wearing that, but he's like such an obnoxious little shit. It's like so funny. The movie is dark, man. It takes some really dark turns. Has anyone in the chat have seen that, Day of the Locust?
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's kind of a forgotten film from the 70s. It was, it's not a film that gets talked about a lot, even though it's a big, like, epic movie. And I think even when it came out originally, it was not received well because, again, it's a movie that stirs a lot of emotions in you. It's a powerful film. It's effective filmmaking. Well, I mean, I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but yeah, it's definitely a film worth checking out.
So if you want to see something ridiculous, I was still into making mix CDs at the time, and it's sort of not just totally pivot, but to sort of move into music.
Okay.
I already told you one of the songs, or the main song, I guess, that helped to influence the feeling of the book, I guess. I Am the Highway by Audioslave, because as I was writing it, I was like, forget all these people. Like, they were friends, but they're liars. I can't get far enough away. It was the basic gist of it. Well, I made him a stupid mix-CD with all these, like, ridiculous songs by, like, Leonard Cohen and Radiohead and stuff, and, like, things in French. Dead Can Dance. It's all very, like, it can put you, to give you an idea, Bjork, like, to give you sort of an idea of, like, the kind of people who I was appealing to, I guess. And I don't like most of the songs on it. I was just like, oh, I'll make him this, because then maybe they'll respect me, because I like their weird music. The Taylor Swift version. Taylor Swift wasn't a thing then. This was like in 2009. There's no Portishead on there, Matthew, because I actually like Portishead. And Portishead, one of the songs is actually kind of one of the ones where I sort of used it as a way to get over all the stuff that had happened in there. I can't find this! Fuck Bjork? Yeah, pretty much. Anyway, a lot of their thing was music too. They'd put on like Pink Floyd for like 42 hours at a time and just like zone out. And they'd be like, man, I'm so like above everything. I'm reaching that area. Or they'd listen to like one Tool song for 4 days straight. Like, fucking ridiculous. Don't hang out with hippies, kids. That's the idea.
Takes a dark turn.
You might get yourself an interesting book, though, if you so decide. So, I wrote a lot of poetry about him. It's not good. I'm not going to read it. So don't worry, everybody.
You know, that artist, Robert Crumb, you have his book that, I guess for your father's, but he was very much like an icon of that hippie scene, even though he didn't consider himself a hippie.
Yeah.
He was very much separate from that, but he was just alive during that time and in that place. And stuff appealed
yeah,
to
you
those
can
people.
tell. My book, this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that artist,
my dad's
Robert
book.
Crumb. Yeah, he tells a story about he was drawing since he was a kid, but that he one time he took LSD and it like made his brain fuzzy for a couple weeks, and he created all his most iconic characters like during that period. It's like characters that are famous, like Mr. Natural and Fritz the Cat. It's a really great documentary film because it's called Crumb, and it tells his story and about his brothers, and it's one of the best documentary features. Honestly, it's a fascinating story of this family and his dysfunctional brothers, and as crazy as Robert Crumb is, his brothers are even more so, unfortunately, to the point that they can't even really kind of function in society. So,
Mr. Von Stugel just asked, do hippies really scatter if you bring up work? Absolutely. And actually, the funniest part...
If you play Slayer.
No, the funniest part of this is that later, one of my friends who also kind of left them, but she stayed sort of with them longer, the guy who I based Wild Man off of, he was living in this house with I mentioned in the book, like, a monkey in the snow with no name. That's about one of them. But anyway, he was letting him live there rent-free. And when my friend who was paying rent asked why, he said it's because with his kung fu, he's contributing positively to the universe.
Just the energy he's putting out.
So it's the same or better than rent. So that's why she was paying like twice as much rent and this guy was rent-free, because they viewed her as like a negative influence. Because they were all like free love and stuff, so they'd all been with each other. We used to call it very incestuous, but she refused to do that, so they would shame her a lot for that. and say that she was negatively affecting the universe by not sharing her body with everyone.
It's a very twisted logic. Well,
Yeah.
what it comes up themes is like lack of boundaries, and you see there's no boundaries really, and it's indicative of that hippie culture, that hippie scene, right? And to even try and shame someone for actually having boundaries, it's healthy to have self-respect and the boundaries for yourself and decide who you want to
Well,
spend your
and
time with or share yourself with.
one of the worst parts of it was that she was actually raised by actual hippies whose brains were like mush. And they still acted like hippies from back in the day, except they're in their 60s. So, and they raised this girl, and it was very weird because they lived in the woods and they had all of their like acid vans just all over the place. When she grew up, they all had to take showers together in like one big shower room.
With their parents.
Yes, and her parents' friends, because, they're all sharing energy and whatever. It was very weird. The first time that I met her parents, they were having a huge hippie party. And it was like this huge fire and all these like weird 60-year-olds, like, I mean, by now a lot of them are probably dead. It's almost been like 20 years, but they're sitting around a giant bonfire and they're doing their drums and stuff. And then one of the grossest things that I've ever seen in my whole life happened. They were sitting in an old hot tub shell, and they had set it up over a fire with like a bellows. And they were all just in this like sludge that they never changed. I called it a hippie hot tub. And they were like, come on in here with us. And I was like, no, I'm not getting into that weird acid water with like these old people, like, who were definitely naked
Filthy.
in there. Like, yeah. And in the morning, cause we left and we had fun, me and my friends, but like we walked into the forest and like did some naked hiking and like saw a bear and stuff.
You mean
And
the
then
animal
came
or a
back.
big homosexual?
An actual the animal. Yeah, it was definitely hippie stew, and they all smelled, and like we slept in an old school bus. Like, it was nuts. It was very weird. And in the morning, I got to see the hippie hot tub water, and it was like black sludge. It was disgusting. I was like, I didn't really consider it, but now I'm glad I didn't do it even more than I was last night looking at all these weirdos. Like, very weird. Oh, and somebody asked why she was there, why my friend was there. It stems a lot from her being in love with one of the guys and him being really good at manipulation. As like a short version. That's why she was there. She's not anymore. When I left, she started leaving. They thought it was a magic bus. It was not great. Hippies do bring plague. It's true, man. Like, everyone in Colorado, they're just not good people.
Well, there's a certain that if you're into that scene, right? If you're into just using someone, or you're gonna get by exploiting someone, or kind of parasitically latching onto someone, you're gonna have to be able to manipulate or spin some bullshit, some con, just to rationalize what you're trying to do and get one over on someone. If you're not gonna do, say, actual work.
Yeah. Well, they all, they're all commies. They all want to do, like, oh, I just want to fix bicycles for my friends for the rest of my life and bathe in the river once a summer. Like, these are the kind of people that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Although the guy who played Wildman, he actually played Wildman, who I based Wildman off of. He actually like worked and showered. So because he wanted to own his own dojo. He, in like that sort of crowd, he was different because he was clean. Really. I mean, everybody kind of smelled, and
Well, not
they
by the end of your
had
book.
no, no, uh, definitely not. You know, and then the final thing, and I'm okay with spoilers. If anybody wants it, I'll send the ebook for free. But the final thing at the end that I wanted to be sure he knew was that I didn't care about his life anymore or any of them, which is why the final line is, and nothing mourned, because he dies. And I was like, and nothing's gonna care. Nothing will change because you're empty garbage. Like, basically, you're empty garbage who eats your own shit. So, yeah. More of the story is, be nice to me. I don't know.
Just looking at it from a, say, writer narrative point of view, though, that was one of the, like I said, that thought that was a critique, was the character was passive, never trying to do anything. From a traditional book point, with someone, say,
Yeah.
if the situation is they're trapped or something, then their goal is like trying to escape. Or
I
like
can
maybe for the most.
understand that being a critique for sure.
Yeah, but then when you told me this was a real situation, this was just floating through, but it has that dream-like feel then, whereas in a dream you're just passive as well, with things just happen. But that's why I recommended the author Franz Kafka, because his work is very much dreamlike and dark dreamlike, but his characters still they still have their motivations and their actions even through these crazy scenarios and surreal dark nightmares. So an interesting author to check out for sure, and I think you'd really like him too, because his sensibilities and aesthetics, I think, would be up your alley.
I do like aesthetics. Um, so it's just a little tiny book. This is what I wrote it on. And I would do things to appeal to his character, like be like, oh, to be continued without expectation and with love. Like, it's so stupid. Um, and, you know, I look at it and I'm like, wow, this is really good writing, but what I was doing was really dumb. Just trying to, like, get on his good side. And this is exactly what he copied on. Was this just, like, chunks. It's hideous. This is why I was so, well, part of why I was so mad. I was like, why the hell would you do that? Like, he didn't even try and put it into paragraphs or anything. And as you can see, like, it, since it's just chunks, it doesn't have any of the chapters the way that the actual book does. I had to turn it into chapters, and I wanted the chapters to make sense. And each chapter has a corresponding part chapter, I guess. So, like, chapter 1 and the final chapter are the, like, twin chapters, I guess. You know, there's 2 winters, 2 springs, 2 summers, 2 autumns, and then the one describing the places are the twin chapters as well. I just kind of did that because I liked it. I liked how it looked. It doesn't always have to mean, like, something intense. Sometimes it's just, I
to me
liked
that was all
it.
part of the passivity too. There was the seasons, because we have no control over the seasons. They happen regardless of what we're doing. So the character was passive for most of the story. So to me it fit thematically in that sense. That's what I thought when I read it.
Oh, well, then that, sure. He
So
totally did it. I was very meaningful.
well, I think you put things in. Well, I think everything is meaningful, even if you're not aware of it. You know, like, there's things you draw from. There's a reason something comes to mind, and you include it for certain things you
Oh
might
my
even be
god!
conscious of.
Jim just noticed something I didn't even notice. Oh my god, sorry. Summer 69.
God. Like Brian Adams.
What? Just blew my own mind. Wow. That song, actually, I can't listen to it because it makes me cry. I should read. I don't know if I can read an excerpt. It's hard for me to read my own stuff out loud, man. Let me go see. Mm,
You don't have to if you don't. If you feel
yeah.
comfortable later.
Matthew's saying I should, but I can't see. I'd rather have a man read it, like a man read it out loud. I don't know why. I don't like hearing my own stuff in my own voice. It's freaking painful. I did do it under a pseudonym though, because I was like, if I'm gonna send, because I send almost all of them a copy, with a little thing inside the dedication page, because the dedication page, the loved ones and the liars, I can never be close enough or far enough, was basically just because I couldn't afford to use the lyrics from I Am the Highway, where it's friends and liars don't wait for me because I'll get on all by myself. I put millions of miles under my heels and still too close to you, I feel. And that I couldn't use. It would have cost money. So I condensed it and just made the sort of emotion into just those 2 lines. And also, the millions of miles thing meant a lot to me because I actually moved to Hawaii at one point to get away from some of these people. And then I missed
Hawaii.
them. Hawaii.
You wanted to go to an island in the middle of the ocean. You went that far to get away from them all.
And then I was ridiculous and I missed them, so I came back and, everything else happened and I had enough of it and I came down to Florida because Colorado's like a shithole now. Pretty much. And not totally because of, the mountains, because I liked being around the mountains all the time and stuff. The thing is, everyone there is a garbage person because they're all from California. No offense to anybody who's intelligent from California, but it's not the same place it was when I was growing up. In many ways, it's uglier. Boulder and Fort Collins are the worst cities in the world. I think what is it? South Park did an episode where they have Fort Collins in it, and some people don't believe me, but everything in South Park that's about Colorado is 100% accurate in every way. And watching the Fort Collins portions, I was like, wow, it's almost like reliving my life. And Mo, there were no drum circles or anything in Hawaii because I moved to Maui, which is where Pearl Harbor is, so it's just a lot of military and stuff.
Well, that happened in South Park too. Butters went to Hawaii where when he found out he was really native Hawaiian.
Oh, did he? I thought he was Canadian.
No, Butters,
that...
little
No, that's the little brother.
Yeah,
I
weird heads.
haven't seen it.
It was a funny episode where Butters finds out he's really from Hawaii and he goes there to go through his ritual.
Oh.
So it's funny you bring that up. Did you know? Are you into the music of Patti Smith, or you know her music at all?
Not offhand.
She was one of the original punk rock rockers from the 1970s, and she's just really iconic. She's also an amazing writer, writes a lot of beautiful poetry, she's written a lot of books. She wrote this great memoir called Just Kids. And it's about her and her her gay friend Robert Mapplethorpe, who's a famous, iconic photographer, and they would both like runaways, kind of on the streets in New York when they were really young, and they found each other, and they really love each other, even though she's straight and he's gay, but they, really have this deep emotional bond. It's this beautifully written memoir of just them and that time in the '70s in New York, the Chelsea Hotel, and then she's meeting all kinds of people, and the title "Just Kids" is actually from her and Robert Mapplethorpe on the streets, and there's some tourists on the streets of New York, and the wife says to her husband, they're like these Midwest tourists, and the wife says, "Oh, look, take a picture of them. I think they're artists." And the husband says, "Oh, come on, they're just kids." And they're both grew up to be iconic artists, obviously, but they were both right. The wife's like, "I think they're artists," and the husband was right. So he's like, "Yeah, they're just kids." So it's a funny title. But yeah, she writes a lot of poetry too, so I think you'd also find her interesting.
Yeah, I have a lot of poetry, but I'm not going to scar anyone's ears with reading it. Nobody likes poetry.
I know. Mo Big suggested I read some of your book, but I don't know.
I know. Like you can if you're okay with it. I don't want to do it. It sounds horrible.
Is there a particular chapter you think?
I don't know. Matthew was saying to read a piece from that end one, Quietus. So you can. You don't have to read the whole chapter. I mean, it's only 4 pages.
Yeah,
but
just a little piece. Yeah.
If you want to. It's not like I kind of made it longer than it actually is. You can see the formatting. Mm-hmm. I wanted it actually to be similar to my favorite book of all time, which is called Keeping Secrets. It's by a Norwegian man named Tormod Haugen, and almost nobody has heard of him, which is a shame because I think he was probably one of the best writers I've ever read, but the way he wrote is kind of like that, where it's a lot of like one sentences, and then it'll have like and you can see I underlined like everything. So I was kind of trying to do that. I'm not sure I succeeded, but.
So that's like a single narrative, that book, or is it like?
Yeah, it's just about a little girl. It sort of, yeah.
Kinda.
I don't know if that's how it was actually first written, because it was first written in Norwegian. And I've not been able to get my hands on like the book in Norwegian to see if maybe that's just the translation and how they wanted to do the translation. But he was actually, he's actually considered like the C.S. Lewis of Norway. And they actually made this book into a movie in the 80s. And I have looked so hard for this movie. I even wrote the actors.
And it's a Norwegian film?
Yeah. And it's called Zeppelin. They had it in like Spanish and a couple other languages too, German I think, and Norwegian obviously. I have looked so hard. I even wrote like the Norwegian Film Institute, Swedish Film Institute. No, nobody can find this fucking movie for me. I went nuts over it, like, cause I really want to see it, and I can't even find like clips of it on YouTube. And I wrote the director on their Facebook. I wrote all the actors, even like people who I was like, well, they might just have the same name, like, because it has an IMDb page. It has an IMDb page.
From the film?
No. No.
Did you write in English or Norwegian?
I guess I should have done it in both, but maybe someday I'll find someone who can find it for me.
Sometimes go to Amazon.co.uk and you can find a lot more European stuff by going off the British Amazon. I've done that sometimes.
Okay, that's a good idea. That's one thing I hadn't tried. Lost Media. I don't know. I even asked I joined some Norwegian page when I had Facebook, and I was like, hey, is anybody
Well, if you
who's
get the
like
European DVD, though, you have to
40?
get like a European DVD player or one that can play European DVDs. They have different region codes over there.
Oh, yeah.
So you'd have to get just a special player just to play the European
If
movie.
if I had to, man, I would. I want to see it so bad. This is my all-time favorite book of all, like, forever, always.
It's
So,
called Keeping Secrets.
in English, but in Norwegian, it's Zeppelin.
Okay.
Because it's like the keyword, like a special secret word. And it has an element of fairy tale in it too, but that was where I got the formatting. But also, it was a way to make the book longer, quite honestly.
Yeah, I was a little surprised that I thought the story was gonna be longer, and I'm like, I feel like I got through there. So by the end, like, okay, well, this is definitely the end of the story.
No, it's a pretty short book. I mean, it took me, I think it took me 3 days to read it to my dad while he was dying of cancer.
Oh,
But
wow.
because like he wasn't, awake the whole time, it wouldn't have taken as long if he had been awake. And it's kind of a dark book. I didn't realize how dark until I was reading it out loud in a cancer ward.
The place
I
to
was like,
discover
oh,
it.
right? I was reading it. I was like, oh my God. This is very depressing. And I know I asked my dad, like, do you want me to keep reading it? Or do you want me to stop? He's like, keep reading. Because he kept asking to go outside. But they wouldn't let him. And I was like, well, my book has a lot of nature imagery. So maybe I can sort of ignite his imagination and sort of because I mean there's a whole chapter where I just describe the land and the trees and stuff. So like maybe I can do that for him in place of him getting to go outside, because I mean he was in the middle of Knoxville, or Knoxville, so it's not like he could go out directly into nature anyway. But like they wouldn't even let him go outside. So I found out how short it was when I was reading it out loud. And I found out how dark it was.
Yeah.
But I mean he said he liked it, so there's that, I guess. Did I name the film? Yeah, the film is also called Zeppelin.
So I think I found a good excerpt to read out loud from your book here towards the end, from Quietus.
Okay, I'm gonna mute it and stop my camera because it's embarrassing.
All right. From the chapter Quietus. Wildman had not felt fullness in so long that his body automatically calmed when he was finished. Endorphins assaulted and he was hooked. From then on, he ate all of the dough excrement he saw. Each time he consumed it, he felt calmer and fuller. Soon his teeth and lips were stained yellow and brown. He could think of nothing else but the dough. Where was the dough going? He didn't care. Days and nights passed. He would come upon an impression in dewy grass where the doe had slept and lament, grunting. How could she rest and yet still be beyond him? Even when he was going without, he no longer wore the clothing. It had rotted off. His hair was no longer clean and brushed, long and thongs holding. In every few inches, now it dripped with mud, sweat, dirt, and feces. His breathing became hastened, and his eyes dry and wide. Wildman followed the doe through every climate he had ever imagined. Soon he developed a kind of tunnel vision as his sanity waned. I think that's a good place to stop. You can come back, Ellie.
That's so weird, because like hearing you read it doesn't even sound like my words anyway. That's weird. It's very surreal.
To hear someone else read your writing is interesting section to read too.
Yeah. Interesting. Now I'm like, I want other people to read my books more. Nobody cares.
Neil Gaiman's great at that. I've seen him do that live, actually, read his own work. not all writers can read their own stuff. So most of them suck at it actually. But Neil Gaiman like really gets into it. He'll do the characters. It's fun just to have him read his own work with all his passion.
Um, I don't think I could. I think a couple times when I was in Colorado, I'd go to like open mics and I'd try and read one of my poems out loud, and I just felt stupid the whole time. It was like, oh, I could easily think, like, I definitely think my poems are good, but like nobody else likes anyone else's poems. So, I could tell like nobody cared really, you know, because I'm in the audience and I'm like, I don't care about this poem, it sucks. So I was like, it's a guarantee that everyone in the audience is like, why is this person reading poetry? Yeah, don't let this work sour you on backing Egg Beater. Egg Beater's a totally different animal. In like every way. Not just that it's a comic, but it's not the dream, you know, lilting sort of fairy tale that Wild Man is at all. In any way. And as far as I know, there's no eating shit yet.
Yet. That may come.
I have my wizard in my fantasy novel does it too. But mostly like his fingernails and like scabs and stuff. So it's a little bit different, but it just seems like what needs to happen for the story. I don't know what's Xevious? Xevious? Don't hire SpiritScar to do the audiobook. Don't worry.
So when it would influence the comic book Egg Beater?
Really, I was just in college, my first year of college, and I was in a drawing class, and we were doing still lifes, and she had put out these random objects that were all painted white, and one of them was this hand-cranked, like, old-school egg beater. And when we were done, I stole it because I thought it was weird. And I would walk around, like, that night at my friend's house just going, like, at people and being like, what if this went into your eyeball? Like, it's weird. And I have that picture on my Twitter of me, like, sticking my tongue in it and stuff. And it was all very silly, but that was the inspiration for what has become Egg Beater. It's not as involved of a story as, you know.
Well, not as personal.
Yeah, or it is personal. It's way more fun. I think I definitely understand this book's not for everyone. But I do have a couple styles, I guess. Oh my gosh, there's like this crazy thing happening in my chat right now. Sorry. Xevious, he paints a CG book called Sins of the Fae. Check him out. Okay.
Is that a CG book, huh? Didn't know it.
I'll write it down. On not my old journal.
There's a comic book artist too. I was talking to Finn about it, but Von Bodie is another underground artist from the 70s who does these kind of like fairy tale books, but they're a little like adult kind of edge, like sexual kind of raunchy kind of things in there, snuck into these like a fairy tale little stories. His famous character Cheech Wizard, this kind of debaucherous magical figure. It was much the style of that time, 60s and 70s, those comics, that animation. How'd you talk about the heavy metal movie that you looked at, right?
Yes. I don't know if I'd call that movie beautiful, but definitely the animation is awesome. Don't show him the script before he signed a contract. Okay. Wow. Yeah.
There was a
I think-
great animated movie close to that time called American Pop. It's from Ralph Bakshi, and I made Fritz the Cat and Heavy Traffic, and he was part of that whole scene of adult animation. Well,
Sure.
that is a beautifully animated film. It's from the history of the United States, like pop culture from like the 20s up until when it came out, like late 70s, early 80s, and it encapsulates just the history of the country through pop culture in a generation, 4 generations of a family. So much good stuff out there. Well, if we're gonna start wrapping up, if you like, I think we've been.
Yeah, that's probably good. Wow, we've been on for 2 hours.
I know, amazing these people stuck around.
Right? Well, maybe they're looking at my dog. My dog's over there being cute.
Does he have a donut around him?
Yeah. Yeah, he does. Because he's a frickin' idiot. I think he likes the donut, though, so I might just leave it on him. He's, like, really chill when the donut's on him, and he's kind of high-strung, usually, so.
Oh, it does that function like a security blanket or a sweater?
I think so. Yeah.
Like to be wrapped up in something?
Yeah. He's... Okay, if my dog were a person, he would be the kind of person who has to, like, turn a doorknob 4 times before they open it. Or who has to wash their hands 7 times before they're done washing. He's very nervous. I don't know why. But that is my doggo. Dog's not what I'm here to look at. What are you here to look at, Wolverine? The
you
weird
have a very,
avatar.
Nature. You have
It was a
quality,
good...
right?
Who?
You.
Me? Oh, with
Well,
my stupid dog?
Well, with the wild man too, right? You have this need to nurture and care, and we even have a dog that feels more needful of that to be taken care of.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not above mocking people to try and build them up, including my dog. But I love my dog, though. That's different.
Yeah, you gotta mock that dog when he's wearing a donut around him.
Yeah. He just, like, he uses it as a pillow. Usually he uses my pillows as pillows, but I don't like that. So, that's what's happening right now.
Alright.
It's not a rug. Anyway.
Oh, that tapestry back there?
Yeah, it's a tapestry. See, some people have culture. Jeez.
Alright, well, I think we can wrap up here.
Alright, well, thank you, everyone.
Final thoughts, I guess. Yeah, thanks everyone for listening.
And yeah, we've got Death Metal Hero in there for the final word, maybe. Amit hanging out doing whatever you and Mo were doing.
What is Amit says he wins. Amit always wins. That's alright.
Smiling Bandito, thank you very much for coming. Your time is definitely appreciated. Jim, of course. Let's go up. D-Wag hung out for a long time. Matthew. Mr. Fowler. Mr. Fowler. That was terrible. Don't let me do that again. Oh my god. Ugh. Oh, Sauce was here for a little while. Nice. Oh, I did link the movie. People are asking about the movie. Just in case. IMDb? Yeah, just in case, I will put the... Oh, who was doing it with Amit? I'm not... Perth, hello. Yeah, just in case, I'll throw it in there. It was made in 1981. I don't know.
Zeppelin, right?
Yeah, it's very depressing every time I think about it. But, that's the way it's like.
Scandinavian cinema tends to be, right?
Yeah, I even wrote like the director and stuff. And just maybe it's not to be. I don't know. Oh, D-Wag. Okay, that's what was happening. Perth and everybody. I hope I didn't miss anyone. I hate missing people. It makes me feel so bad. Oh, Wolverine. Thank you for showing up. Talking about Brian Adams. I think. Oh, Mr. Von Stugel and Simple Jack. And yeah, I think that's it now. Thank you very much. Oh, and Billy gets in right at the very end. Hey, Billy, we're turning off now. All right. So
Good night,
thank you, everyone, and good night.